All right. Hello, everybody. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for Meet the Culinary Leaders of WCK's Chef Corps. I'm Laura Hayes, the Chef Corps Senior Manager here at WCK, and I first want to take a moment to tell you about our Chef Corps program. The Chef Corps is a global network of more than 400 prominent culinary leaders who champion World Central Kitchen's mission, providing fresh meals following crises. Thanks to their generosity, adaptability, and visibility, Chef Corps members are uniquely positioned to accelerate and amplify what WCK can accomplish when we arrive first to the front lines. Chef Corps members chiefly serve as local liaisons when a crisis occurs in their home region. Chefs are some of the most trusted and connected people in society. Chefs are some of the most trusted and connected people in society, and the relationships they've built help us get cooking faster and best serve the local community. They also make WCK more nimble around the world by fundraising, volunteering, and representing us at events. During today's conversation, you're going to meet 3 chefs in our Chef Corps who are going above and beyond serving memorable meals. A growing number of culinary professionals are adopting advocacy roles and using their platforms to better their industry or their community. Common areas of interest include sustainability, hunger, school food, labor issues, healthcare, identity, LGBTQ+ causes, and immigration, and in our case, disaster relief. Allow me to introduce you to our guests today. starting with our moderator, Katherine Miller. Katherine is the author of At the Table and is known for her work training chefs to be advocates. She quickly discovered that chefs are some of the most powerful forces for change in our food system. They lead hunger relief efforts, support local farmers, fight food waste, and confront industry racism and sexism. In At the Table, Katherine shares techniques developed for the James Beard Foundation's Chef's Bootcamp for Policy and Change. The book teaches readers how to focus their philanthropic efforts, pinpoint their audience, develop their arguments, recruit allies, support action, and grab attention in a crowded media landscape. Thank you, Katherine. Our first panelist is Chef Anita Jaisinghani, the co-owner of Pondicherry Restaurant in Houston, Texas. She was born and raised in India and is of Sindhi descent. Her restaurants have been nominated for 5 James Beard Awards, named Best New Restaurant by Bon Appetit, listed in the top 100 in Gourmet Magazine, awarded the Best Indian Restaurant in the country by Travel and Leisure, and named at the top of Houston Chronicle's 25 Best Restaurants for 9 consecutive years. She has been deeply involved in championing causes for women's empowerment and sustainability. Thank you, Anita. Please meet Chef Jazz Johnson. She is an educator and community organizer who dedicates her time to empowering New Yorkers through food access and education. Chef Jazz runs the first culinary department at a K-12 independent culinary school in the country at the Dalton School in New York City. She also managed a successful community fridge program during the pandemic. And finally, we have Chef Chris Shepard. He is a James Beard award-winning chef and the founding director of the Southern Smoke Foundation. Chef Chris helped change the landscape of the Houston culinary scene since opening Underbelly Hospitality in 2012. His innovative and trailblazing organization provides grants for hospitality employees who fall on hard times and also offers free mental health counseling for hospitality industry workers across the country. Thank you all so much. Katherine, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you to the whole team at World Central Kitchen for having us today and for all of you who have showed up. It's really amazing to see the support that this community gives to you all and to each other. We thought we'd kick things off just by hearing a little bit about each of the chefs' journeys and some of the work that they're doing currently. And Anita, I'd love to start with you. Thank you for joining us from Copenhagen too. Both you and Jazz are in different time zones, so we really appreciate that. But Anita, as Laura mentioned in her introduction, you have been a longtime champion of women's health, safety, women's rights, women's equality within the food system. I'd love to just hear a little bit about, and for the audience to hear a little bit about your journey and what you're currently working on.
Well, I've been a champion of women's since I was a child, I feel. And I also come from a country where patriarchy and misogyny is normal. It's not something people call out, it's just the norm. So I wanted to see a different side of that. And I did in America, it's much better. But about 11 years ago, we started a program called the Community Breakfast at Pondicherry, where we donate the half of our sales for the morning to a nonprofit that we believe in. And we've done food nonprofits, we've done children, and we've done all kinds of things. But I feel like empowering mothers is the best way to empower the world. So that now we are sending our donations to a nonprofit in Chennai, India, South India, called PCVC. It's actually a nonprofit that, very sad to say, but they help women that are burn victims, domestic violence, but in particular burn, because the woman that started this was a burn victim, and she didn't go back to her husband. She wanted to change how women react to this. So it's really about teaching them skills and teaching them how to create a world outside of a really bad marriage, and not willing to go back to that. So we donate money to them, and I'm really proud of that, and I'm proud of what they do in Chennai. And that's just a drop in the bucket. There's like a ton of those everywhere.
But Anita, that's it, and it's actually a really great pivot to Jazz and their work. But I mean, in teaching skills, raising that money, helping give them hope and empowering them to make a difference in their own life. Those are all characteristics of how chefs like jump into this work. right?
Right.
And I think it's such a powerful testament to that. And Jazz, you're doing that in a school where you're helping kids learn more about healthy fruits and vegetables, food as medicine, all the amazing things you're doing in your work at Dalton. Can you tell us, one, how you ended up in that field and what it's like to do that at the institutional or school level?
Um, I ended up in the field really when I was in culinary school. I heard our director of sustainability, Bill Telepan, talking about an organization he was working with that was called Wellness in the Schools, that was committed to combating childhood obesity, which is a very bold goal. And I felt moved to at least spend some of my time working there while I was beginning to navigate the restaurant world. And I quickly realized that it was very much what I was called to do, as much as I enjoyed my time in restaurants and was doing both for a long time and, still do pop-ups and whatnot. I felt very much that the work that I was able to do with that organization and with different organizations that led me to Dalton, where I'm able to really challenge students to be mindful about their eating practice and, celebrate cultures through cuisine and explore seasonality through food and just all of the things that come with questioning food and growing it and nourishing themselves and their community. It just felt much more impactful than a impactful use of my time. And honestly, just something that I thoroughly enjoy.
Well, yeah, what's doesn't give you great joy more than watching the face of a child change or the face of a student change when you feed them something delicious, right? And tell them like where that came from and see that aha moment. I think that's really a special time. And you touched on something that brings Chris into this, which is one, inspiration from others in the community, Bill Telepan and Wellness in Schools, that strong network, but also looking at bold and audacious goals. And Anita, you're tackling women's gender equity and protecting women from violence. Jazz, you're working in this world of helping making food delicious and meaningful for kids so they make different decisions. Chris, you're taking on some of the bigger challenges in our industry too, around mental health and helping people at great times of need on an individual level. You want to talk a little bit about Southern Smoke and how you got out of the kitchen and into that?
Yeah. So my wife and I started the foundation in 2015 to raise money and awareness for a friend of ours that was diagnosed with MS. And then in 2017, Hurricane Harvey came through. And, for those 2 years, we were throwing basically a big party in the back parking lot of the restaurant, where we would invite chefs in to come cook and people would pay money, and we were raising funds. And then in 2017, Hurricane Harvey came through our city and we decided to change the focus of the foundation because at that point in time, you've got the Mayor's Fund, the Red Cross, JJ Watts Fund, all these, people raising, hundreds of millions of dollars, but none of that was ever going to hit the hands of a person working through the drive-through at a fast food restaurant, or a farmer or a cook or a busser or a waiter. And so we decided to change the focus of what we were doing for hospitality relief. We figured out with our 501c3 the way that we could take on applications, verify employment, and then put money directly into bank accounts of these people. And so that year we had 139 families and we wrote checks for $500,000. And that just sent it on its way to where we are now. Since 2017, we've granted about $12.5 million nationwide. We started off in Texas, but pandemic changed that, and we went to all 50 states and Puerto Rico. And then in 2020, we figured out a way to work. Mental Health America connected us with the University of Houston, and the University of Houston's psychology department. Their PhD students were able to graduate because they were getting their actual hours by taking on students. And so they just connected the dots with us, and we could take, and through a verifying committee, same thing we do for emergency relief, and we can put people into the program at University of Houston and then get access to free mental health care. And we've taken that program now to 2 universities in Texas, and then we are in 10 states nationally as well. We just went into 10. We added 5 more last week, and DC. And so in those 10 states, we work with universities to provide. So basically, once they apply, they get 20 free sessions, which I don't know of any insurance that could cover that. Like our Southern Smoke insurance only gives you 3, but we can do 20 free sessions or 6 months of care. And if we're not in that states, through the emergency relief program, we can get you to see, get you in to see people that you need to.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'd love to hear from each of you about this. I mean, do you think, and maybe Jazz, we can start with you. Do you think there's being a chef or the skills that you've learned in culinary school or in the kitchen make you uniquely qualified to do the work of the advocacy work? I get that it makes you uniquely qualified to do the work in the kitchen and make things delicious, but you, Jazz, particularly are like working with students is a difficult population to convince. Like, is there anything in your sort of chef background that's made that work easier or makes you uniquely qualified to do that?
I would say that, you know, this industry, there's, I think within all of us as chefs, there's a bit of wonder to, you know, the world of food, and that desire to learn and educate ourselves and get excited and share that with those people around us. So my community is not just my students that I'm teaching how to fuel and feed themselves and question where their food comes from, or, you know, educate them on food waste, like reduction methods. It's also my staff, it's also my faculty. And we have the opportunity to show up for one another. There's been moments where, you know, people have hit hard times, or someone is undergoing some sort of, you know, like cancer treatment or what have you, and being able to step up and say, this is how food can fuel you, and this is how food as medicine can support you on this journey, has been part of really my social responsibility to show up for my school community, as well as really educating them and sharing my culture and my perspective with them, which they might not necessarily be exposed to otherwise, and bringing in guest chefs to also do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's such a beautiful part of the chef community, right? It is a community. You do have all of these other folks that you can touch, right? Your students, your staff, as you mentioned, the other folks that surround the school, and then your storytelling. And Anita, you are, with some of the issues that you're tackling an issue that maybe some people don't want to hear what you have to say. And I'm wondering if, you know, being a chef has made you more able to convince them, or at least bring them onto your side, or how you do that. Like, you serve them a plate of delicious food and they listen, or is there something more to how you get people to make that donation and join you in your support of the causes that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's really about thinking big picture, that what's happening in India or in Africa or here in Copenhagen affects everybody. So I think that's the mentality that I've always had, you know, and the older I get, the more important I realize that is. And we all have to eat. So food is not something we can just not do. So if you're going to eat food, eat good food, eat real food. Know that when you eat too much food, or if you order too much food and you can't finish it, it's going to go somewhere. Like, what's going to happen to that? Like, there's a full cycle to food that I feel people often like to ignore. So I do like to talk about the uncomfortable things, that, you know, are you wasting food? And if you look at the statistics, unfortunately, Americans are eating more processed food now than ever, even though there is so much information out about what we should be eating. Like, eat a salad from grains that were grown around you. Like, that is what you should be eating, and we are serving you that. Now they come into Pondicherry looking for that, so we are able to transcribe that into a meal. But you know, the awareness has to come from within, and I just do it through food. So I feel like food's my language and my medium, and I can convey everything. You can have a great meal, but it doesn't have to be, does not have to be processed food. So
yeah, but I love what you say about, like, food as a medium, right? Food as a medium for change. It's a thing that touches all of us. It's a single subject, you know, our health, our communities, and, you know, Jazz, you're talking about sort of the networks around you and the convincing piece. Chris, one of the things I've always been so pressed about with Southern Smoke is the chef mentality towards building an organization, right? You saw a problem, you're going to go fix that problem, you're going to diagnose it. Was that something that you learned as a chef, or was that sort of innate in, you know, who you were as Chris Shepherd, or a little bit of both?
I think it just goes back to drive, right? Because I think anybody in this industry has a lot of drive and desire and passion, and to get it done. And for me, it was one of these things, like, we didn't know where we were going when we started this. We were just throwing a party, right? And we were raising money for our friends, you know, for the organization. But when we focus it in the industry, it really made sense for us to see where we were going and to understand. And every day there's a new question of, like, so do we fund this? And it's like, well, yeah, you know, they are, you know, this morning a question I asked my wife. She was like, so do we fund a landscaper that works for a restaurant group that was out of power and didn't have a job too? And I was like, I mean, yeah, they work for the restaurant, right? And so anything, you know, that's necessity. Would we normally fund landscaping? No, but his sole employer is the restaurant, yes, because we have to look at things like this. And so we kind of, you know, have the ability to shift the way we need to make things and make decisions for the future for our industry. And I think that was a big thing. And everybody that works for the organization has worked in a restaurant at one point or another, whether it be our caseworkers or really anybody. Because, you know, I tell people the last thing I need them is talking to my mother about, you know, what's going on at work, because she's not going to understand that. So everybody that's been a part of this is, or has been in the food and beverage industry at one point or another, because then they all have to thrive.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I think I hear this from a lot of chefs, right? Like, the best people you want to hire are other chefs, because they understand what you're trying to talk about. There's a shorthand, and it's how I feel. I normally don't hire people who haven't worked in a restaurant or haven't worked on a political campaign, right? Like, the atmospheres are very similar. But, you know, Anita, just coming back to you really quickly, like, you know, you talked about this idea of food as a medium. We have these really amazing networks and communities that we're working with, the drive and the skills. Has your work in advancing the women's rights or gender equality, or the work that you're doing with this charity to help women who are victims of domestic violence, has that changed anything about your business? Like,
No, I'm sure I've lost people because of that. I'll tell you what, the first community breakfast we did was 2012. My son was turning 21 in 2011, actually. And I was like, you know, I'm not, he was in out of town. I really want to celebrate. So we started this breakfast, and we were going to donate money to Planned Parenthood. Now, I've always known, I didn't know Planned Parenthood was so controversial in those days. So I mean, I tend to just kind of jump in and then figure out how to swim. So I announced it, and we did this breakfast, and we had, like, literally, I mean, we were mobbed by the Planned Parenthood supporting people, but we had literally people out picketing out in front of the store called Tootsie's that is on the other side on the main street. And I was, you know, people dropped Bibles off, telling me I was a baby killer. And I was like, what are they talking about? I mean, I had to really familiarize myself with what the issues were at the time. I was so ignorant. But I finally got it, and I'm like, wow, okay, so they don't want women to have their own choices. And I have a problem with that. So I've been very vocal about, you know, who I support and why I think women should decide what happens to their bodies, and that's it. So I refuse to, like, get into politics, but that's my stance. And people ask me, I tell them that that's what I believe in. And it's the same thing with India. You know, I feel like people don't like calling out Indian tactics or things that happen there, and I'm like, I'm gonna call it out. Like, it is what it is. You can't just pretend that you can push under the carpet, because there's too much damage happening in the name of, you know, subjugating women. And I feel like, you know, women should have equal rights in everything, and they still don't. So, and I try to say that through food, you know. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how that stuff really gets me riled up. So
well, as it should. And I think that, you know, it's been interesting. I mean, yes, you've been a subject, there's been subjects of controversy, but you've also been nominated for 5 James Beard Awards, and you're a pretty successful restaurateur. So your people have found you too.
Oh, yeah. No, business is good. I have no complaints. And there's enough people, and I don't need like 1,000 people to walk in every day. I need a couple of hundred people to walk in, and I have no problem getting that. So business is good. I just want, I just feel like our messaging needs to be strong. And I think really food is the biggest medium. So food is how I tell people my story. And also I think food, the future of our health is food. It's not doctors, and it's certainly not pills and potions and surgeries. It's food.
Yeah. No, and Jax, I think that's one of the things that you were at Dalton. You are both trying to help educate and inform kids about healthier choices, all the pieces, all the aspects of sustainability. But one of the things you touched on is also the food that is comfort to them, that is culturally appropriate and normal for them. And like, I'm just interested in how you tell that story to all of the students, right? And make them all feel a part of the challenges that you want them to stand up for or address.
Well, culinary is intertwined into education in a way that is unique at Dalton K through 12, is that each grade is coming into the kitchen, into my teaching kitchen, whether it's to learn math or science or history or engineering or art and history. So my fourth grade comes in 4 times a year. That is the age that they're learning about immigration, Ellis Island, Angel Island, all of that. And we're making dishes together, and we're connecting it to projects that are bringing them inside the kitchen, inside the classroom, and are really turning them on their head and exploring, like, what were people eating? What were their comfort foods in this day, this time? How were these immigrants coming in and connecting themselves back to home? As far as me sharing my culture through the kitchen, I make my comfort foods. I make the things that my mother made me growing up. My family's from Honduras, so some days I come in and my cousins shipped me some beans, and I want a baleada, and so that's what I'm making. And my kids will come into the kitchen during their downtime, and they'll smell the food, they'll want to engage, they'll help me stretch out the tortillas, and they'll try the food. There's nothing that's going to inspire you to eat something more than to make something more than the benefit of eating it. But when it comes to telling other stories, I will bring in guest chefs who will share their culture and background and through food. And that is equally exciting because now we have a guest in the kitchen. And we want to know why the whole building smells like, what is this ingredient that I've never seen before? Can I get that recipe? And all of the fun elements of getting into a space and working with your hands and learning through just interaction.
Yeah. And Chris, I see you nodding, and I want 2 things. One, I know that in some of our earlier discussions, you've said that women should run the world. So you were very supportive of all the work that Anita is doing, but I see you nodding in this idea of like teaching, helping inform and educate and move people through food and through those mediums. And I just love to hear a little bit more about how you're doing that with Southern Smoke, the conference, the festival, all the things that you're bringing to the table, so to speak. See what I did there?
Very well played. I think for us, like, as far as like getting an understanding and people to get behind it, like it's we as an organization can change the world through food. I mean, that's it. Because people, our way we try to spread our message is that, we have the conversations over and over again about what we're doing, but it makes sense when we're doing it in a festival setting where people can eat and drink and understand, because the culinary and the food and beverage industry gets it, right? For the most part. Once they hear it for the first time or see it for the first time, they're in. I mean, it's just because it's industry taking care of industry, and that's how it needs to work. But when you start to get 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people at a festival, and they're like, wait, I thought I was just coming for food and beverage. And then all of a sudden there's the underlying story, then it gets people to really buy in, because, I have a very strong opinion about, if you ever put food into your mouth or a liquid into your mouth, that's who we take care of. And so when people really start to understand that, they're like, oh, wait, so like my bartender, when I go sit at the bar and have dinner at the restaurant next to my house, so yes, that's who we take care of. And so it just starts the conversation and gets even more people to be educated about what's going on in this industry, because it is, at times a cracked eggshell, and just trying to fix that is what we're trying to do.
And I think that's a good segue. We've got some questions already pre-populated. Some questions have come in from the audience, and we got some questions in advance online. And one of them is from Natalie in Orlando, and I'd love to hear all three of you talk about this. What is your advice for someone who's devoted their life to hospitality and would love to expand and help people directly in their community and beyond? How do you even get started in trying to do the work that you guys are doing? Chris, you want to start, and then we'll just go to
Sure.
Anita and then Jazz.
I have this question asked all the time. It's like, well, how did you start this? Like, well, look, we didn't know where we were going when we started it, right? We thought we were just putting a bunch of chefs in a parking lot and feeding people and having a good time. And I would say to anybody that wants to start something, find something that you're super passionate about, whether it be big or small, right? But if you're passionate about it, there's only one way to start it, right? Figure out what you want to do, kind of block everything else out, because in this industry, we can be asked to, give gift certificates to whatever, like a dog walking association or a chess club or whatever. And you know what? Figure out what's important to you. Figure out how you're going to try and make that change. And then I always say that if you're not willing to stand at the edge of the water and jam your foot into the water, the wave doesn't start. So it's just doing it. And there's literally only one person in this world that can tell you that you cannot do that, and that is yourself. Don't listen to anybody else. Go forward and make it work, and be able to be flexible, make those changes that you need to throughout it. I mean, that's leaving yourself more than anything else.
Yeah. Anita, you want to build on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Chris. He kind of nailed the answer, but I would say that, when I was getting into the business, I had people making fun of me. They told me I would never make it. I wouldn't last even a year. I had just so many naysayers around me that I just blocked them out, and I did what I wanted to do. And, getting further into it, I realized that, and Chris is right, people ask you for money. Like, I don't know why people think the restaurants have like an unlimited set of funds. Like, I don't remember, people don't go into a bank or something else and ask for money, but a restaurant is constantly asked for donations. It's like, why do you think that we want to donate to you? And he's absolutely right. So you have to really be strong and say no, and direct your energy to what you really believe in. And I really believe that women need to be running this world. And okay, in my lifetime, maybe they won't, but if they do, I'm certainly going to, in my little drop way, try to help with that. And I also think that, women and children, like changing people's perspective of life through food. You give children, a sliced apple or something, and they'll happily eat it up. They're not going to eat the chips if the apple is there. It's really about offering better choices. I know that when my kids were little, I would just cut fruit and I would put it out with their kids playing, and they always ate it. Then they weren't hungry for the wrong kind of food. So it's really, but children is about building. I mean, I'm sure, Jazz, you get that it's about building good habits since when they are little, and that's what affects what they grow up with. So yeah, I mean, I personally never saw a packaged food or something out of a box my entire, I mean, I feel like I grew up 500 years ago, but I grew up in India in the 70s, and I really didn't. Everything was made from scratch, like everything. So that was the only way I knew how to be.
Yeah, no, and I wish that was the case in the US. And I just, two things before, Jez, I'd love to hear your take on this, how do people get moving. One, I want to encourage anybody, if you have a question, to put it in the chat. They'll get it to us and we can try and answer it. And two, a point that Anita, both you and Chris made, we did some work when I was at the James Beard Foundation for the Chef's Boot Camp for Policy and Change, and we audited the giving of restaurants. And the average was about $50,000 a year in time, donations, treasure all the things that restaurants were making. And again, not necessarily hard dollars, but just the donations. And if you totaled that up and you did that and you made one donation of $50,000, you'd be a top donor for any charity, right?
Right.
And so thinking about that focus is a very good point, but also acknowledging the fact that you guys do get asked for a lot. And Jazz, you have a slightly different perch being in a school, but advice on anybody, I get asked all the time, how do I get involved in school feeding? How do I help kids? How do I get us back to scratch cooking? Would love to hear your thoughts and advice on how to get started in the work that you're doing.
Well, for instance, I sit on a few boards with people who are not in the industry at all, but have the relationships or, you know, might have the strategic mind or what have you that can support in that manner. Coming from the community fridge space that I started during the pandemic, you know, I identified a problem. I looked around my community, and there was a tribe of people who also wanted to show up in the way that I wanted to. And we were able to make some real change and, you know, rescue, I believe we're still rescuing about 1 million pounds of food from farmers, like end of day bread bakeries. Some restaurants are still donating. We're rescuing from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Places that have surplus have seen the work that we've been doing for the past few years and have continued to partner with us. And in being able to create those systems 4 years ago, we're still feeding residents. So, and that came from just a desire to show up for our community. So that's how I would approach it.
I think that's and what an amazing thing to continue to shine light on, right? I think a lot of people want us to be done with this conversation about the pandemic and want it like, we're done, we're over it. But people are still food insecure. We are still wasting food. And that is still a problem that needs to be solved. It didn't stop. And the industry is one of the first responders in that work. I'd love to kind of pivot a little because this is a World Central Kitchen webinar and conversation, and each of you is involved with that organization in addition to the other things that you work on. I'd love to hear just your own personal story about why you think, why WCK, you know, rings the bell for you in terms of its work. And maybe Jazz, just we'll start back to you and then we'll go back around the Zoom.
The work before I joined, I was already very familiar with the organization and the work that they were doing. And it was like before anything, it was like the like the Red Cross, first responders, front of line, but in a skill set that I actually possess, right? Would have loved to join the Peace Corps, never had the skill set. So the work was something that I always attracted me to the organization. I remember when I first was approached, it was an immediate yes before the question was asked.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that idea of first responders, right? And that I just want to be clear, that question came from Lisa in Durham, North Carolina. But Anita, why do you dedicate some of your limited time to World Central Kitchen and its efforts?
Well, I feel like how do you not want to get involved when something happens? So maybe like about 20 years ago, one of the big storms that came through Houston, it was either Katrina or Rita, I can't remember the details, but I know people, when the one that New Orleans was destroyed with. So people were coming off these buses and it was all on television. And this is, I think, before World Central, I even knew what World Central Kitchen was. And I only had my original Indica location. And I remember inviting some regular guests and my customers friends to come volunteer. And we made like boxes and boxes of sandwiches. And I went out there, took some of my staff and my friends, and we stood there. And when people came off the bus, we handed them a sandwich. And we just did that because we didn't know what else to do, because we were fine, but we know how badly New Orleans had been damaged. And it was just a way to somehow feel better about yourself. I think we do things for other people to feel better about ourselves, really, in the end. And it just made me feel so good to do that. So when WCK started, I was like, oh my God, let's get involved. So we did. And I think I'm one of the only people that, one of our chef, Scott, he went to Miami, worked 8 days when there was a big storm in Miami, and he said, came back and said, I have never worked so hard my whole life, because they made like thousands of meals in a day. And he said it was one of the best things he's ever done. And he's always ready to come back if you guys need him. So it was a great experience, and we admire what they do or what you do. We really
Yeah.
do.
No, I think how different we would have thought about Hurricane Katrina, and what happened in New Orleans and all of that if we had had World Central Kitchen at that
Yes,
point.
that was the word, Katrina, that's right. And
Yeah.
World Central Kitchen was not even like in existence then, right? So
Yeah. I don't think so. I mean, maybe it was a nascent idea, and,
very small,
but
yeah.
I having in part lived through that experience, like I just think about how different it would have been to have those first responders and those chefs. So and thinking about some of the first storms and trying to work with World Central Kitchen in its early days to bring trucks of food and other things. So it's been an amazing thing to watch grow. And Chris, you have an organization that is very complementary to World Central Kitchen, and yet you continue to work with both, right? Like you are quite supportive of it. I'd love to hear maybe your first experience with WCK, or why you and Southern Smoke and WCK work so well together.
Well, I think just one in the restaurant and the hospitality industry, like that's your first thing, is when something happens, you're the first one in, you're the last one out. Like you are there, and it's just your goal is to start cooking. I think with World Central Kitchen, at least it kind of helps to organize all of that, because I think you saw it definitely during Harvey, where every restaurant was just trying to feed people, and they're like, where do I take this food now? And it's like, well, I wish there was something that was more organized, and I think World Central Kitchen really helps to do that. And get the food where it needs to go without, having restaurants just drive around being like, are you hungry? Are you hungry? Or, so it helps that out. And, we made the decision with Southern Smoke, like there's World Central Kitchen. We are not going to get into the world of feeding people, because, I think also what happens is that when there is a catastrophe, or when there's a disaster or something that, people that lose everything really worry about, like what happens. And when they first see that person show up with food, it really makes that soul a little bit settled, like, okay, things are going to be okay. And then for us, it's really helping with the infrastructure, like when WCK comes in and they're cooking for people, but when they leave, we need to be there to help with the infrastructure of getting them back into homes, making sure that they have clothing, making sure that they get the things that they need after their power is turned back on, or whether they lose their home, or whatever it really is, the situation. That's where we come into. So it's a very complimentary thing. Get them taken care of immediately. Now get them taken care of for the long haul.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's shocking how quickly these webinars go. Like time just flies. I'd like to just get one last thing from each of you in terms of what's giving you hope in the world at the moment, and what's the story, or what's the thing that is giving you hope in the world at the moment that you'd love to share with this community that's on. And Jazz, maybe I'll start with you.
I'm very fortunate to work with the next generation, and to plant seeds and see what young advocates and look like and sound like and how they operate, and to know that my students care more about whether or not you recycle than what designer clothing you're wearing or what have you, so that is definitely a silver lining to the dumpster fire that we're currently kind of living through right now.
Yeah. Chris, what's giving you hope in the world?
I think it's conversations like this, where you start to see, because, for me, I'm so insulated in what we're trying to do, but seeing that other people are doing something as well, and that there's people that are making the decision to stand up on their own and to make the change in their own neighborhood, and to start something a little bit that can move into something huge. And I think that was how this world starts to be a better place, because when we can identify what we see wrong and then make that positive change. I think that's what is inspiring to me every day. So Daz and Anita, thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah. And Anita, what's giving you hope?
Well, I'm the world's most optimistic person. So I always I just think of, I'm not the kind of person that doesn't. So I think what Jazz said is so true, because taking care of the next generation and knowing that they care about recycling, when the pandemic happened, I'd come through a really hellish part in my life, and we went down from like, went down to like 6 employees, and I'm like, we're going to start composting. And we did. And now we have a, zero waste restaurant and I feel like we even trained our customers to know what goes in the compost pile and what doesn't, because they may not compost at home, but they do when they come to Pondicherry, because we make sure they don't throw things anywhere they like. So it's, and nobody has ever made us feel bad about it. Nobody has called us out, or when people appreciate what we do, they may not want to do it. So I just think that the world, I'm just an optimist, and I think that the world's coming to a better place, and I feel people are understanding more about climate change more and more. And I think that, it's all gonna be okay. I'm just not I don't think we're in a dumpster fire. I know it feels like that, but I'm just more optimistic than that. And I feel like, I have a lot of faith in the young generation. So I hope I'm right.
I believe you are.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I hope you're right too. I mean, I'm sort of like on the fence between
That-
dumpster fire
that's
and
a-
optimism.
As you're teaching that generation correctly, we're gonna be all right.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Anita and Jazz and Chris, thank you all so much for taking part in this webinar. I mean, I think you've given the folks on the line so much to think about. Find your passion and your focus, figure out how you can help solve the problem that help contribute to solving the problems that you see in the world, using food as a medium, really leaning on your networks and your communities and your support systems, and also utilizing those chef skills and the drive that you all have in this. I think you all give me hope in this situation when we put all those things together. So thank you so much. And thank you to Laura and the team. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Laura, for the final word here, but just thanks so much for having us today.
Thank you.
You got it. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Katherine, such a pro. Thank you all out in the audience for joining us today. Shout out to the Chef Corps members in the audience. I saw some of you signed up. That's wonderful. We could not do our work without you. One thing that really stuck with me from this conversation, Chef Jazz, I loved how you said that, within this industry, there's all a bit of wonder. There's a bit of wonder in all of us about the food world, and that there's this constant desire to keep learning and pushing. And my job is a pretty easy one. I go out and find, the culinary mayors of their town so that they can help us respond when needed. And I have to say, chefs are just absolutely yes people. So thank you all for what you do. Our work wouldn't be possible without you. Couple of housekeeping things. We're excited to share that the first ever World Central Kitchen cookbook is a New York Times bestseller and just won a James Beard Award last month. I was there. It was awesome. A portion of all cookbook proceeds go back to World Central Kitchen. And by the way, there are several recipes in there from Chef Corps members. And if you like what you heard today and you want to support WCK's work in the field, please consider making a donation. Your contribution allows WCK to remain flexible and adaptable in delivering aid wherever it's needed most. To donate, simply visit wck.org/donate or scan the QR code that's up on the screen. You can also support WCK by signing up to be a part of our volunteer corps. You will be notified if there are volunteer opportunities in your area. Thank you so much for your support of WCK and for believing in the power of food to bring hope and comfort. We're really enjoying these virtual conversations we've been having over the past couple months. Hope to have more. We really appreciate all the interest in our work. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists and to Katherine.